Marcus looked around the silent courtroom one more time. Everyone was waiting to hear what he would say. Coleman and Rivera sat at their table, no longer looking confident. Their lawyer, Paul Davis, was nervously tapping his pen on his papers. "I need 30 minutes to review everything," Marcus announced. "Court will take a short break." Marcus went back to his office, behind the courtroom. Linda Martinez followed him with a cup of coffee. "Judge Washington, are you okay?" she asked. That was quite a surprise out there. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair. "Linda, I need you to pull up Coleman and Rivera's complete police records. I want to see every complaint that has been filed against them." Linda worked quickly on her computer. Within 15 minutes, she had printed out a thick stack of papers. Marcus read through everything carefully. What he found made him even more angry. Over the past 5 years, Coleman had received 12 complaints from citizens. Most of them were from Black and Hispanic people who said he had treated them badly during traffic stops. Rivera had 8 complaints with similar stories. One complaint was from an elderly Black woman who said Coleman had yelled at her and made her cry during a simple traffic stop. Another was from a young Hispanic man who said Rivera had searched his car for no reason and called him names. In every case, the police department had found no wrongdoing. The officers had never been punished for any of these complaints. The department always believed the officers instead of the citizens. Marcus also found something else interesting. 3 other officers had quit the police force in the past 2 years. All 3 had written letters saying they could not work with Coleman and Rivera anymore. One officer wrote that Coleman and Rivera made the whole department look bad and did not respect the citizens they were supposed to protect. Marcus looked at his watch. It was time to go back to the courtroom. When Marcus walked back in, the courtroom was even more crowded than before. News reporters had arrived and were sitting in the back rows. Someone had called the local newspaper and television station. "Court is back in session," Linda announced. Marcus sat down and looked at Coleman and Rivera. They both looked sick with worry now. "I have spent the last 30 minutes reviewing the complete records of Officers Coleman and Rivera," Marcus began. "What I have found is deeply troubling." He held up the stack of complaint papers. "Officer Coleman, you have received 12 citizen complaints in 5 years. Officer Rivera, you have received 8 complaints. These complaints show a clear pattern of misconduct, especially toward minority citizens." Paul Davis tried to interrupt, but Marcus held up his hand. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "I have reviewed the security camera footage from Mr. Lopez's arrest. What I see is 2 officers using unnecessary force against a young man who was cooperating fully. Then I read your police reports, which do not match what the video shows. You lied in official documents." The district attorney, Robert Chun, was taking notes and nodding. He had not known about all the other complaints when he made the plea deal. Marcus looked directly at Coleman and Rivera. "Last night you treated me exactly the same way you treated Mr. Lopez. You assumed I was a criminal because of the color of my skin. You humiliated me in front of other citizens. You searched my property without cause. This shows me that your behavior toward Mr. Lopez was not a mistake or a bad day. It is how you always act." Danny Lopez and his mother were holding hands tightly. Danny's mother had tears running down her face. "The plea agreement before me suggests probation and community service," Marcus said. "But I do not believe this punishment fits the crime or addresses the serious pattern of behavior these officers have shown." Paul Davis stood up quickly. "Your Honor, my clients have agreed to plead guilty. The prosecution has agreed to the terms." "Mr. Davis, I am not required to accept any plea agreement," Marcus replied. "And in this case, I will not accept it." Coleman and Rivera looked at each other in panic. This was not what they had expected at all. Marcus continued speaking. Officers Coleman and Rivera, you took an oath to serve and protect all citizens. You have broken that oath repeatedly. Your actions have hurt innocent people and damaged trust between the police and the community. The courtroom was completely silent, except for the sound of reporters writing in their notebooks. Therefore, Marcus said, I sentence Officer Coleman to 6 months in county jail, followed by 3 years of probation. I sentence Officer Rivera to 6 months in county jail, followed by 3 years of probation. Gasps filled the courtroom. This was much harsher than anyone had expected. Additionally, Marcus went on, both officers must complete 200 hours of community service in minority communities. They must also complete sensitivity training and anger management classes. I am recommending to the police chief that both officers be terminated from the police force. Coleman started to say something, but his lawyer grabbed his arm to stop him. Finally, Marcus said, I want both officers to understand something. Your badge does not give you the right to treat people badly. Your uniform does not make you better than the citizens you serve. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their race, their job, or how much money they have. Marcus looked at Danny Lopez. Mr. Lopez, I hope this sentence helps you feel that justice has been done. You did nothing wrong, and I am sorry for what these officers put you through. Danny nodded and whispered, Thank you, Your Honor. Marcus then looked around the entire courtroom. Let this case be a reminder to everyone that no one is above the law. Not police officers, not judges, not anyone. We all must be held accountable for our actions. The bailiff came to escort Coleman and Rivera to jail. As they were led away in handcuffs, neither officer looked back at Marcus. They knew their careers in law enforcement were over. After the courtroom emptied, Marcus sat alone for a few minutes. He thought about the night before at the rest stop and how humiliated he had felt. Then he thought about Danny Lopez and all the other people who had been hurt by these officers. Justice was not just about punishment, Marcus realized. It was about making sure that people who had power used it correctly. It was about protecting citizens from those who would abuse their authority. Linda Martinez knocked on his door. Judge Washington, the reporters want to talk to you. Marcus straightened his robes and walked outside. He had something important to say to the community about justice, respect, and treating all people fairly. The story would be in newspapers across the country by tomorrow morning. But more importantly, 2 bad officers would never hurt innocent people again. At 10 o'clock sharp, Marcus walked into his courtroom wearing his black judge's robes. The courtroom was busier than usual. Word had spread that 2 police officers were going to plead guilty to misconduct charges, and many people had come to watch. Marcus saw Danny Lopez sitting in the front row with his mother. Danny still had some bruises on his face from where Coleman and Rivera had hit him 3 weeks ago. His mother held his hand tightly. She looked nervous and sad. The district attorney, Robert Chun, was sitting at one table with his papers spread out in front of him. At the other table sat the defense attorney, a well-dressed man named Paul Davis, who was known for helping police officers get out of trouble. Then Marcus saw them. Officers Jake Coleman and Tony Rivera walked into the courtroom with their lawyer. They were wearing their best suits and trying to look respectful, but Marcus could see they were not worried. They expected to get probation and community service, then go back to their jobs like nothing had happened. All rise, called Linda Martinez. The Honorable Judge Marcus Washington presiding. Everyone in the courtroom stood up. Coleman and Rivera stood up too, but they were looking around the room, not paying much attention. They still had no idea who their judge was going to be. Marcus sat down behind his big wooden desk that was raised up high so everyone could see him. You may be seated, he said. As soon as Coleman and Rivera looked up at the judge, their faces went white. Marcus could see the exact moment when they recognized him. Coleman's mouth fell open. Rivera grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself. Marcus looked directly at both officers. His voice was calm and professional. "Officers Coleman and Rivera, I believe we met last night." The entire courtroom went quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. The defense attorney looked confused. He turned to his clients and whispered, "What is he talking about?" Robert Chun, the district attorney, leaned forward in his chair. He could tell something important was happening, but he did not know what. Marcus continued speaking. "Before we proceed with today's hearing, I want to make something clear to this court and to everyone present. Last night, at approximately 9 o'clock, I was stopped by these two officers at a rest stop on Highway 49. Danny Lopez and his mother looked at each other with surprise. People in the audience started whispering. I was returning home from a judicial conference, Marcus explained. I stopped for coffee and gas. I was wearing casual clothes and driving my personal vehicle. Officers Coleman and Rivera approached me, questioned my right to own my car, handcuffed me without cause, and searched my vehicle without permission. The defense attorney, Paul Davis, looked like he wanted to disappear under his table. He whispered something to Coleman and Rivera, but they were too shocked to answer. Marcus kept talking. During this encounter, these officers made several assumptions about me based on my race. They suggested that I could not possibly afford my own car. They implied that I was involved in criminal activity. They treated me with disrespect and humiliated me in front of other citizens. Robert Chun was taking notes as fast as he could. This was not what anyone had expected to happen today. However, Marcus said, I want to assure everyone in this courtroom that my ruling today will be based solely on the facts of the case before me and the requirements of the law. My personal experience with these officers will not influence my decision, but it has given me valuable insight into their character and their pattern of behavior. Paul Davis finally found his voice. Your Honor, I request that you recuse yourself from this case due to your personal involvement. Marcus had expected this. Mr. Davis, I have considered that option carefully. However, my experience last night does not create a conflict of interest. Instead, it provides this court with additional evidence of the defendant's conduct and character. I will proceed with this hearing. Coleman finally spoke up. Your Honor, we didn't know you were a judge last night. Marcus looked at him with cold eyes. Officer Coleman, would it have mattered if you had known? Should citizens be treated with respect only if they hold important jobs? Should you behave professionally only when you think someone might have power over you? Coleman did not answer. He looked down at his hands. Furthermore, Marcus continued, I showed you my business card last night. You saw that I was a judge. You laughed and said I did not look like any judge you knew. Do you remember that? Rivera was sweating now. He whispered something to his lawyer. Marcus turned to the district attorney. Mr. Chun, please read the charges against these defendants. Robert Chun stood up and read from his file. Officers Coleman and Rivera are charged with police misconduct, excessive use of force, and filing false reports in connection with the arrest of Daniel Lopez on June 10th. And what does the plea agreement propose? Marcus asked. The defendants have agreed to plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for 2 years, probation, and 100 hours of community service. No jail time. Marcus looked at Danny Lopez and his mother. The young man still looked scared, even though he was the victim in this case. His mother had tears in her eyes. Mr. Lopez, Marcus said gently, would you please stand and tell the court how this incident has affected you? Danny stood up slowly. His voice was quiet when he spoke. Your Honor, I was just driving home from work. I work at Miller's Grocery store to help my mom pay rent. When these officers stopped me, I tried to be polite. I did everything they told me to do, but they still hurt me." Danny's voice got stronger as he continued. "I was in the hospital for 2 days. I missed a week of work and lost pay my family needed. But the worst part is that now I'm scared every time I see a police car. I never did anything wrong, but they made me feel like a criminal." Marcus listened carefully to every word. When Danny sat down, Marcus looked at Coleman and Rivera again. "Officers, do you have anything to say before I consider this plea agreement?" Coleman and Rivera whispered with their lawyer for a moment. Then Paul Davis stood up. "Your Honor, my clients accept responsibility for their actions. They are sorry for what happened, and they want to move forward." Marcus nodded. "I see. And do your clients believe that the proposed punishment fits their crimes?" Paul Davis looked uncomfortable. "Your Honor, we believe the plea agreement is fair and appropriate." Marcus spent the next few minutes reading through all the files again. He looked at the police reports, the hospital records from Danny's injuries, and the security camera footage that showed what really happened. The courtroom was completely silent while everyone waited for Marcus to speak. Coleman and Rivera kept looking at each other nervously. They were starting to realize that this was not going to be as easy as they had thought. Finally, Marcus looked up from his papers. What he said next would change everything. Marcus Washington did not sleep well that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of those 2 police officers. He remembered the cold metal handcuffs on his wrists and the way they had laughed at him. He kept thinking about all the people who had watched him being treated like a criminal. When his alarm clock went off at 6 in the morning, Marcus was already awake. He had been staring at the ceiling for an hour, thinking about what had happened at the rest stop. His wife Karen noticed that something was wrong. "You look tired," she said as they sat at the breakfast table. "Did something happen yesterday?" Marcus told her about the police officers and how they had treated him. Karen listened with a shocked look on her face. She had been married to Marcus for 20 years, and she knew he was a good man who always followed the rules. "That's terrible," she said. "You should report them to their supervisor." "Maybe," Marcus said. "But right now, I just want to forget about it and focus on work." Marcus kissed his wife goodbye and drove to the courthouse. He had been working in the same building for 8 years, and usually he felt happy when he walked through the front doors. Today was different. He still felt angry and hurt from what had happened the night before. Linda Martinez, his court clerk, was already at her desk when Marcus arrived. Linda had worked with Marcus for 5 years. She was a smart woman who always had everything organized and ready for him. "Good morning, Judge Washington," Linda said with a smile. "You have a busy day today. 15 cases on the schedule." Marcus poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down at his desk. Linda handed him a thick folder with all the case files for the day. Marcus opened the folder and started reading through the papers. The first few cases were simple: traffic tickets, small thefts, and other minor crimes. Then Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold. There, on page 7 of his schedule, were 2 names he recognized: Officer Jake Coleman and Officer Tony Rivera. Marcus read the file more carefully. The 2 officers were being charged with police misconduct in using too much force during an arrest 3 weeks ago. According to the report, they had beaten up a young man during a traffic stop and then lied about what happened in their police report. The young man they had hurt was named Danny Lopez. He was only 19 years old and had been driving home from his job at a grocery store when Coleman and Rivera pulled him over. They said he was speeding, but Danny said he was not. The officers had pulled Danny out of his car and hit him several times. Danny ended up in the hospital with a broken nose and 2 black eyes dotted first. The police department believed Coleman and Rivera's story. They said Danny had fought with them, and they had to use force to control him. But then a security camera from a nearby store showed what really happened. The video proved that Danny had not fought back at all. The officers had hurt him for no reason. When the video came out, Coleman and Rivera were arrested. They were facing serious charges that could send them to prison for several years. But their lawyer had worked out a deal with the district attorney. If they agreed to plead guilty to smaller charges, they would only get probation and community service. No jail time. Marcus read through all the papers twice. He could not believe what he was seeing. The same two officers who had humiliated him last night were going to be in his courtroom today. And according to the plea deal, they were going to get a very light punishment for hurting an innocent young man. Marcus walked to his window and looked out at the parking lot. He could see Coleman and Rivera walking toward the courthouse with their lawyer. They were laughing about something, acting like they did not have a care in the world. Linda knocked on his door. "Judge Washington, is everything okay? You look upset." Marcus thought about telling Linda what had happened at the rest stop, but he decided to wait. First, he needed to figure out what to do about the case. As a judge, Marcus had rules he had to follow. One of the most important rules was that he could not judge a case if he had a personal reason to be unfair. If a judge knew someone in the case, or if something had happened that might make the judge too angry or too friendly, then the judge had to let another judge handle the case. Marcus knew he should probably ask another judge to take over Coleman and Rivera's case. What had happened at the rest stop would make it hard for him to be fair. He was angry at the two officers, and that anger might affect his judgment. But Marcus also thought about Danny Lopez, the 19-year-old boy who had been beaten up by these same officers. Danny deserved justice, and the plea deal seemed too easy. If Marcus stepped aside, another judge might just accept the plea deal without really thinking about it. Marcus also thought about all the other people these officers might hurt in the future. If they only got probation and community service, they might think they could keep treating people badly without facing real consequences. There was another problem, too. Marcus realized that his experience at the rest stop actually gave him important information about Coleman and Rivera. It showed that what happened to Danny Lopez was not just a one-time mistake. These officers had a pattern of treating people badly, especially black and Hispanic people. Marcus sat in his chair for a long time, thinking about what to do. Through his window, he could see more people arriving at the courthouse. Lawyers, police officers, family members of people who were in trouble. They all came to his courtroom looking for justice. At 9:30, Linda knocked on his door again. "Judge Washington, court starts in 30 minutes. Do you need anything?" Marcus made his decision. "No, Linda, I'm ready." He put on his black judge's robes and looked at himself in the mirror. He thought about all the times he had put on these robes before. Usually, they made him feel proud and important. Today, they felt heavier than usual. Marcus picked up the file with Coleman and Rivera's case. He was going to see those two officers again, but this time, things would be very different. This time, he would be the one in charge. He walked toward the courtroom, knowing that the next few hours would change everything for Coleman, Rivera, and himself. Justice was about to be served, but not in the way anyone expected. Officer Coleman walked back from the police car with a strange look on his face. Marcus could tell that the computer had shown exactly what he expected, a clean record with no problems. But instead of looking sorry or embarrassed, Coleman looked even more angry. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Coleman said. Marcus could not believe what he was hearing. "What? Why? You just checked my license. Everything is fine." "Turn around now," Rivera said, moving closer to Marcus. His hand was still on his gun. Marcus felt his heart start to beat faster. He knew he had done nothing wrong, but he also knew that arguing with these officers would only make things worse. Slowly, he turned around and put his hands behind his back, The cold metal handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Marcus had put handcuffs on many criminals in his courtroom, but he had never worn them himself. They were tighter than he expected, and they hurt. "This is crazy," Marcus said. "I haven't done anything wrong." "You checked my license and registration." "What is this about?" "We need to make sure your story is true," Coleman said. "Lot of stolen cars around here lately." Marcus knew this was not true. If they really thought his car was stolen, they would have found that out when they ran his license. This was about something else entirely. Rivera opened the door to Marcus's Mercedes and started looking through it. He opened the glove box and pulled out papers, throwing them on the ground. He looked under the seats and in the cup holders. "You can't search my car without permission," Marcus said. "We can search it if we think it might be stolen." Coleman. Lead. Rivera found Marcus's briefcase in the back seat and opened it. Inside were legal papers from the conference, his business cards, and some files he had been reviewing. Rivera looked through everything, making a mess of the organized papers. "What's all this legal stuff?" Rivera asked. "I told you, I work at the courthouse," Marcus said. Coleman grabbed one of the business cards from Rivera. It said, "Judge Marcus Washington," in clear letters. For a moment, both officers were quiet. Then Coleman laughed. "Judge, huh?" he said. "You sure don't look like any judge I know." "What's that supposed to mean?" Marcus asked, even though he knew exactly what it meant. "Most judges around here don't look like you," Rivera said with a nasty smile. More people were gathering around. Now, a family with 2 small children stood near their car, watching everything. The children looked scared. An older man had come out of the rest stop building and was recording everything with his phone. "Why are you doing this?" The older man called out. "That man hasn't done anything wrong." "Mind your own business," Coleman shouted back. A woman in a red car had also stopped to watch. She got out and walked closer. "This is wrong," she said. "You can't treat people like this." Rivera walked over to the woman. "Get back in your car and leave, or you'll be next," he warned. The woman looked scared, but she did not leave. Instead, she took out her phone and started recording. Marcus stood there in handcuffs, feeling more humiliated than he had ever felt in his life. In his courtroom, he was respected. People stood up when he entered the room. Lawyers called him Your Honor. But here, he was just another black man being treated like a criminal. "How long is this going to take?" Marcus asked. "As long as we want it to take," Coleman said. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided. To drive around in a car you can't afford." "I can afford it," Marcus said. "I work hard for my money." "Sure you do," Rivera said. "What kind of work do you really do? You sell drugs?" Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. "I'm a judge," he said more loudly. "I've been a judge for 8 years. I sentence people like you when they break the law." Coleman laughed again. "People like me? What's that supposed to mean?" "People who abuse their power," Marcus said. This made Coleman even more angry. He grabbed Marcus by the arm and pushed him against the car. "You watch your mouth," he said. "We're the ones with the badges." Here, the small crowd of people watching was getting bigger. Some were taking pictures and videos. Others were just staring. Marcus felt embarrassed that all these strangers were seeing him treated this way. A young couple walked out of the rest stop building. When they saw what was happening, the woman covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh my God," she said. "What did he do?" "Nothing," said the older man who was still recording. "He didn't do anything. These cops just don't like seeing a black man with a nice car." Coleman heard this and walked over to the man. "Give me that phone," he demanded. "No," the man said. "This is public property. I have the right to record." Coleman looked like he wanted to grab the phone, but he knew the man was right. Instead, he walked back to where Marcus was standing. Rivera was still going through Marcus's car. He had pulled out the floor mats and was looking under them. He opened the trunk and started throwing things around. "You won't find anything," Marcus said, "because there's nothing to find." "We'll see about that," Rivera said. The search went on for 30 more minutes. The officers looked everywhere, under the hood, in the spare tire area, even inside the air vents. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. Finally, Coleman walked back to Marcus. "We're going to let you go," he said, like he was doing Marcus a big favor. "But we're going to be watching you. If we see you around here again, we'll find a reason to arrest you." Rivera uncuffed Marcus and handed him his license and registration. The papers were dirty now from being thrown on the ground. "You should be more careful about where you stop," Rivera said. "This isn't really your kind of neighborhood." Marcus rubbed his wrists where the handcuffs had been. He looked at the two officers and then at all the people who had watched his humiliation. He wanted to tell them exactly what he thought of them, but he knew it would not help. "Have a good night, officers," he said quietly. He got in his car and drove away, leaving the two officers standing there. In his rear-view mirror, he could see them talking to each other and laughing. Marcus drove in silence, his hands shaking with anger and embarrassment. Tomorrow, he would be back in his courtroom, wearing his judge's robes, dispensing justice. But tonight, he was just another black man who had been reminded that his education, his position, and his success meant nothing to some people. He had no idea that in less than 12 hours, he would see those two officers again. Marcus Washington looked at his watch as he drove down the empty highway. It was almost 9 o'clock at night. He had been driving for 3 hours now, after a long day at the judicial conference in the next county. The meeting had run late, and all he wanted was to get home to his family. Marcus was a good man who worked as a judge. He was 45 years old and had been a judge for 8 years. People in his town liked him because he was fair and kind. He always tried to do the right thing in his courtroom. Today, he was wearing simple clothes, just jeans and a polo shirt, because the conference was casual. His black Mercedes sedan was running low on gas, and he needed to stretch his legs. When he saw the rest stop sign, he decided to pull over. The rest stop was not very busy. There were only a few cars parked there, and most of the travelers had already gone inside the building or were getting ready to leave. Marcus parked his car near the gas pumps and got out. The cool night air felt good after sitting in the car for so long. He walked around his car a few times to stretch his legs, then went inside the small building to buy some coffee and use the bathroom. The coffee was not very good, but it was hot and would help keep him awake for the rest of his drive home. Marcus bought a large cup and a bag of chips. The young woman working behind the counter smiled at him and wished him a safe trip. He thanked her and walked back outside to his car. That was when he first saw the police car. It was parked at the far end of the rest stop, and Marcus could see 2 officers sitting inside. He did not think much about it at first. Police officers often patrolled rest stops to make sure travelers were safe. Marcus opened his car door and put his coffee in the cup holder. He was about to get in when he heard a voice behind him. "Hey you, stop right there." Marcus turned around and saw one of the police officers walking toward him. The officer was a white man who looked to be in his 30s. He had short brown hair and was not very tall, but he walked like he wanted everyone to know he was in charge. His name tag said Coleman. "Is there a problem, officer?" Marcus asked. He spoke in a calm, polite voice. He had learned long ago that it was always best to be respectful when talking to police officers, even when they were being rude. Officer Coleman stopped a few feet away from Marcus. "Where did you get this car?" he asked, pointing at the Mercedes. Marcus was confused by the question. "It's my car," he said. I bought it last year. The second police officer had gotten out of the patrol car and was walking toward them. This officer was shorter and had dark hair. His name tag said Rivera. He looked at Marcus with suspicious eyes. "This your car?" Officer Rivera asked, even though Marcus had just answered that question. "Yes, it's mine," Marcus said again. "Is there some kind of problem?" Officer Coleman walked around the Mercedes, looking at it carefully. "Pretty expensive car," he said. "What do you do for work?" Marcus hesitated for a moment. He could tell the officers already did not trust him, and he was not sure if telling them he was a judge would make things better or worse. "I work for the county," he said, which was true. "What kind of work?" Officer Rivera pressed. "I work in the courthouse," Marcus said. Officer Coleman came back around to where Marcus was standing. "You got any ID?" "Of course," Marcus said. He reached slowly into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. He handed his driver's license to Officer Coleman. Coleman looked at the license for a long time, then showed it to Rivera. They whispered to each other for a minute, then Coleman looked back at Marcus. "What are you doing in this area?" Coleman asked. "I'm driving home from a work meeting," Marcus explained. "I stopped here to get gas and coffee." "Where was this meeting?" Rivera wanted to know. Marcus told them about the judicial conference, but he could see they did not believe him. Both officers were looking at him like he was lying about something. "You sure this is your car?" Coleman asked again. "Yes, I'm sure," Marcus said. He was starting to get frustrated, but he kept his voice calm. "Would you like to see the registration?" "Yeah, let's see it," Rivera said. Marcus opened his car door and reached into the glove box to get the registration papers. Both officers stepped closer, and he noticed that Rivera had put his hand on his gun. Marcus handed the registration to Coleman, who looked at it carefully. The name on the registration matched the name on the driver's license, but Coleman still seemed suspicious. "Step away from the car," Coleman ordered. "Why?" Marcus asked. "I've shown you my license and registration. Everything matches." "Just step away from the car," Rivera said more loudly. Marcus did, as they asked. He was starting to understand that. These officers had stopped him not because he had done anything wrong, but because they saw a black man driving an expensive car and decided something must be wrong with that picture. Other people at the rest stop were starting to notice what was happening. A few travelers had come out of the building and were watching from a distance. Marcus felt embarrassed and angry, but he knew that getting upset would only make things worse. Officer Coleman went back to the police car to run Marcus's license through their computer system. Rivera stayed with Marcus, watching him closely like he expected him to try to run away or do something dangerous. "Nice night," Marcus said, trying to make conversation. Rivera just stared at him and did not answer. Marcus stood there waiting, knowing that his license was clean and that the computer would show he had no criminal record. But he also knew that even when the officers found out they had made a mistake, they probably would not apologize. In his 8 years as a judge, he had seen this kind of thing happen too many times. The wait seemed to last forever, but finally Coleman came back from the police car. He did not look happy.